All right, welcome back. It's been a while since I've made a video, and I want to continue my series here. It seems like there was a good response to the book reviews that I was doing, especially the anatomy books for artists, the recommendations for artists. If we're looking back, most of these have to do with comic books because that was, again, where my influence first started in wanting to become an artist and wanting to study art. So this first one here, this is DC Comics Guide to Digitally Drawing Comics, and that's by Freddie E. Williams II. And this is a great book for anyone who is interested in sort of the new way of creating comic books. So if you are in any way interested in creating a web comic, or you just want to use some digital tools in the making of comic books, your artwork in your comic books, this is a great book if you're interested at all in using technology to create artwork, especially creating sequential art in the form of graphic novels or comic books. This is a highly recommended book. All right, next one, we've got Brian Michael Bendis, Words for Pictures, The Art and Business of Writing Comics and Graphic Novels. And this is a terrific book from the perspective of a writer. So it not only talks about the techniques and processes that a master writer, Brian Michael Bendis, uses, it also is the way that the artist and the writer have to collaborate and work together to create these types of stories. So this is sort of like team storytelling here. You have an artist that is telling a story through images, and you have a writer telling stories through the words. And this is another essential addition to your library if you are interested in this type of work. Next one we have here is really just, it's a graphic novel, and it is Joker, DC Comics Joker. And this is by Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermeo. When I look at this, I mean, this is just amazing. Just his storytelling, his ability to tell a story with these panels and the flow of the book and the sequential art is just insanely great. This is one of the better Joker stories that I have ever read, but mostly I was captivated by the artwork. I think that a lot of these panels are basically just finished pieces of artwork by themselves. So just a really great book if you are interested in the genre of graphic novels and comic books, which I was for a really long time. This one is Icons. It is Jim Lee's artwork, and it's the DC Comics and Wildstorm artwork of Jim Lee. And you can see here my method of tagging the pages. There's tons of stuff here that I've wanted to refer to for various reasons over the years. So this is basically a whole career, and Jim Lee has had several starts to new careers and has done some great things in comics and business. But this is when he was at DC, so DC and Wildstorm. So it's a lot of your great DC characters. Batman, there's a whole section on Batman, a whole section on Superman, a whole section on Wonder Woman. You know, if you're interested in comic book art at all, this is a great addition to your library. And the great thing about this, I think, too, is that it's full of not only the finished artwork, which is great, but also you can see the rendering of the pencil pages and then how that carries over into the inks and the color. So if you really want a snapshot into the way that the artist works, the way that Jim Lee works, who is one of the modern day masters in this genre, I highly recommend this. I mean, it's probably worth it just for that one page with all these different, showing these emotions in the faces here. So, terrific book, Icons. I will link to all of these books in the description below so you can pick them up. This one is really cool because Joe Quesada is actually the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics now, and he started out as one of their top artists. And I mean, it's kind of like a story, almost like a Jim Lee-like story. These guys start out as artists, and then they become, basically, they're running a company. They become almost like CEOs, which is awesome, and they do a great job. But the downside to that is they just aren't able to draw as much because they're so busy with all these other things. But the Daredevil series that Joe Quesada did, again, you could see all these marked pages here of the things that I wanted to refer to. But the Marvel Knights Daredevil series, I wasn't even really collecting comic books at the time. I think I was in grad school, and I just was had a break in a class, and I stopped in a comic book store, and I came across the old Marvel Knights Daredevil books, and I picked one up, and I had to get all of them. So I've actually, over the last 10 or 15 years, tracked down all of those because there was some of the best sequential art that I've ever seen in those books, and the artwork was by Joe Quesada. The art of Mark Silvestri, so you see there's a pattern here. Anytime I would see a book that said the art of, and it was an artist that I was really a fan of, I would have to own it. Mark Silvestri started out when I was collecting comic books in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. He was doing his run on X-Men, but he's pretty much had his hands in a ton of different properties. So he went to Image with some of the other really awesome artists in the 90s when there was the comic book boom. You can see several Marvel, so here's some of those older X-Men covers by Mark Silvestri, and he was doing the interiors too. And you know, I think when you get really interested in this type of thing, you become almost obsessed or a huge fan, sometimes you won't even look at a book, you won't even accept it if it doesn't have the level of artwork that you've gotten spoiled by some of these guys. All right, this is one of my favorites in my collection. This is Mythology. So this one I recommend for almost anyone. It doesn't really matter if you're interested in comics or not, but this is the DC Comics art of Alex Ross, and I actually got the opportunity to meet Alex Ross. You can see here that he signed my book. I went to a book signing. I actually called in sick to work one day early in my teaching career just because I heard that Alex Ross was signing this book at the American Academy of Art in Chicago, where he went to school, and actually his mother attended school there as well. This is just the top-notch level here. I mean, this is the guy that pretty much brought painting. This is one of his drawings when he was a kid, and a picture of him in 1977. So I think we're around the same age. So this book talks about a lot of his influences, how his approach has changed over the years. He's got sections devoted to the major characters that he's known for painting. Here's an example of one of the pages from one of his graphic novels, which is just insane that you're going to do a finished painting for every panel. You're talking about hundreds of paintings to tell a story in a graphic novel. But pretty much, if you know anything about comics or you're interested at all in comic books in that genre, then you know who Alex Ross is, and you know you should probably already own this book. But if you don't, add this one to your collection. This one's called Notes to Draw From, comic book illustration, and this is by Mitch Bird. So this one, I really just like the stylized way that he's illustrating things here, and he actually starts to dive into the whole animation type stuff that you would be thinking of, like the squash and stretch and how gravity affects things. And while his work is very stylized, the reason that I would study this is everything has such a weight, such a volume. It seems so believable. Like the characters seem like, you know, they're actually lugging around their mass. I don't know, probably a better way to say that, but everything just has, it's so believable. Even though it's a cartoony looking style, it just has a believability to it that I think comes from, and what you can learn from him is the way that he uses perspective, the way that he uses, the way that he deals with mass and composition. Just really, really a great book if you're interested at all in drawing. Not just comic book drawing or cartooning or animation, but definitely if you're into those types of things. This one, Battle Chasers, I don't even know if you're going to be able to get this, but this was published by Cliffhanger, and this is Joe Yeah, so they call him Joe Mad. This guy, I mean, this just was like, holy cow, this is insane. I just love his style, the way that he depicts characters, just super dynamic artist. And he has since gone on to create several really popular video games, and I actually think that he owns his own video game company where they publish video games. So he was a comic book artist for a time, but then he just kind of moved on to superstardom in some other areas. All right, we're almost done here. So we've got the best of Draw. This was sort of like a collection of articles that was from the Draw magazine, and you know, there are top comic book artists here kind of talking about different subjects. So there's a painting from life section, there's a section on inking, different types of techniques. This is just a really cool book that has a variety of references from a variety of different artists. This one, Drawing Power, How to Draw Comics by Bart Sears. This one I studied a ton. Like, I really responded to his style, and this is like a little thin book that you can kind of throw in your backpack and carry around with you, so you're not lugging around these giant hardcover books. But it talks about, again, you know, sequential art and working from a plot and composition and splash pages and the whole process from rough pencils all the way through finishes. He even has a section on inking in here. So this is sort of like another version of How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, it was one of my favorite books, so that's probably why I responded so much to this one. So that's Drawing Power, Volume 1, the splash page. I don't know if he ever ended up making any more of these, or if we just never got past Volume 1. But if there are any other versions of this, I probably would pick those up even still. This one was a collection of there's a section in Wizard magazine, when Wizard was a magazine, that was How to Draw. And this volume was compilation of all of those lessons that were in the Wizard book, which for a while, the magazine, I was collecting the magazine only for this section. Like this, I would go straight to this section, and you know, I wouldn't really pay a lot of attention to the rest of it. But here, for example, we've got a lesson on creating sultry women, and this is by Adam Hughes. So this was like the top artist. I mean, everyone, Terry Moore, there's a section with Terry Moore in here. I mean, it's like superstars. Here's Michael Turner, did a section on sex appeal in these drawings and how to draw women. So this book is worth its weight in gold, because you're really getting, it's a classroom in a book from all of these pro artists that were at the top of their game. Here's a section by Jim Lee, right? This is an old, you know, these are old articles. So this is when Jim Lee is first coming up, when he's still working for Marvel. So if you can find this, I'm going to look into it a little bit. Here's one by Greg Land. I don't know if he's still around working in comics. But How to Draw, the Best of Wizard Basic Training. Last book, one of my favorite artists, another one of my favorite artists, J. Scott Campbell. This is the Danger Girl Sketchbook. And this, I mean, I wore this thing out. Just looking at J. Scott Campbell's work, I think that there's a real obvious influence to Disney-style traditional animation here in his characters, and he brings that into the genre of comic books, which was basically taking two of my favorite genres and blending them into one. So I'll go and find J. Scott Campbell's booth at cons, and I'll pick up these sketchbooks, because his stuff is just, I mean, it's so fun to look at. To study it, it's great. It's a great way to pick up the way that artists stylize the figure. But his stuff, yeah, I like to study it, but it's just like, it's so, every single drawing that he does, every mark that he makes has just got such character to it that I could just look at his artwork all day long. So that's J. Scott Campbell's Danger Girl Sketchbook. But that basically concludes my series on books that I think that you should add to your library. I want to engage in a conversation. I don't just make these videos to give myself something to do. I want to share the information that I have, and hopefully it's valuable to you. And I hope that you take the time to respond back, and we can have a conversation and sort of, help each other grow as artists.
Thanks for watching. There's a little button that they put on the laptop or something, and then they say click it, and then you can never even miss a video.
That's if you subscribe.